So I'm here with Malta, who is, I guess, one of the more well-known Australian Counter-Strike professional players nowadays, which is funny to say, given where you sort of started and what I thought of you when you did first start as a player. But now you're on Renegedes, and that's one of Australia's most prolific teams, and you've just recently won Road to Rio. You've been a mainstay at the top level of ANZ competition, really, I feel like, since probably 2016. And, you know, people probably know you from things like IEM Sydney, where you've been one of the, again, most consistent representatives from the ANZ region. So, Malta, I mean, obviously, you've had a pretty cool career. Do you want to sort of tell me first, I guess, how things kind of started? Now, I did ask you, like, a little bit before we started sort of theorizing this video, what your first team was. And I think you ended up sort of diving a little bit deeper into the history books, and we've come up with Dinosaurs in Space. Is that the correct team, or was there one before that? It
was Flying Dinosaurs in Space. So we had like we all had a dinosaur as a picture, and I edited them in Photoshop, and it was like a different color of like some kind of space looking, galaxy thing. And I was the red dinosaur. Then we had like all of us, but it was pretty much the same lineup. So we played, that was like first season CGO, played with those guys. And then I kind of played with the same group when we played CGA. And then, yeah, we kind of jumped from CGA to CGP one season. And then from there, it kind of just, yeah.
So that was like around late 2015, sort of September 2015, at least is where I kind of found a bit of information about you for the first time, and that's kind of when Crown 55k Invitational actually happened. So if you remember that event, you were playing with Aftermind at the time, as far as I understand, and you kind of competed, you tried to get into that qualifier and tried to make it into that matchup. Interestingly, in that game, or in those games where you were trying to qualify for Crown, and this is kind of like a prelude to what ended up happening in your career. You played against the Chiefs as an org, and obviously you lost all these games, by the way, because at that time you were kind of pretty average.
So mean.
But you lost to Chiefs, which was an org you would later on join, and then you also lost to Dexter, who was playing for SYF at that time. So it's quite funny to kind of go back and look at the history of not only yourself as a player, but just all of the Oceanic region as a whole. Did you sort of like look at this event as something where you sort of started to take Counter-Strike seriously, or were you already taking Counter-Strike seriously at that point, or did it sort of come after Crown 55k?
I think it probably came a lot after that. I think I was kind of just playing it as like a procrastination for uni. Like I was just kind of not enjoying the course I was doing, and I had mates who I met. So one of my teammates was called Zane. He that was his in-game name as well. We met in like a chemistry what's it called? I can't remember the name. Like just a prac, basically, a chemistry prac.
And or something.
Exactly. And we're in the same group, and he was like, "So anyone play Counter-Strike?" And I was like, "Ooh, I play Counter-Strike." And then we just kind of like played some games together, and then I joined up with his team, and that's who Flying Dinosaurs in Space was. And it was kind of just like a good outlet to play, or to just procrastinate uni work and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what was happening at that point, and still even kind of into the Chief days, that's what was happening. Was I was just like, man, I really don't enjoy this uni course, and CS is now and more becoming like something I could maybe do as a career. But it kind of only hit me after I went. So I actually went and spectated the Crown event. So we drove down, me and my mates drove down from Sydney to watch it, and after that I was kind of like, oh yeah, this could probably be something that, like, if I got good enough, I could do it as a career. But yeah, definitely at that point it was just me. I didn't want to do uni work.
I think it's pretty funny that you say that, because I very much had the same sort of mentality about that event, because obviously I was casting that event, and for me that was probably the first big Counter-Strike event that I casted. And then after that was where I was sort of thinking, you know what, actually this might be something that I could potentially do for a career if I had the opportunity. So I think a lot of people in the ANZ Counter-Strike scene kind of go back to that particular event as like almost the starting point in their career. Not that it was the very first event that they did, but it was the one where they thought, okay, this is kind of what I want to do. But what I do want to sort of touch on here with this team that you played in, the Aftermind roster, and the one that you competed in the Crown Qualifier with, is that you're the only player that sort of still exists from that roster that is playing Counter-Strike currently. So what's the difference between Malta as a player compared to the rest of the players on that team? Like, why are you still around when some of those other guys, who I would probably argue were considered maybe better players than you at the time, are no longer existing in ANZ Counter-Strike?
I'm not sure. I think I just had a bit, maybe like less to lose than the rest of the guys. Like, I think some of them were in final year university or kind of just doing degrees that they enjoyed. And so they were like, well, this is something that, it's a career path that I want to go into. And if I don't focus now, then that's going to be something which I won't be able to go into in the future, or it's going to set me back like to a point where they just decided it wasn't worth it. So I think that was, I don't know if he was on the team at the time of Aftermind, but AZN, who was like just really, I still play, like I played pugs with him yesterday and stuff. Really nice guy, but he was doing, I think he was doing like a pharmacy degree, and he was kind of like, it's affecting my studies too much, so I just have to give it up. And I think that was the same for Chaotic, who was in the Aftermind lineup. He was like, he was doing year 12, so doing his HSC or whatever it is in Adelaide. I don't know if they, what they do. But he was like, I got to focus on that. I can't focus on CS as much. So he kind of took a break for a year, I think. And once you take that break, I think you kind of just, it's hard to get back into the same like place that you were. Yeah, so I think everyone just had a reason why, they got drawn back to real life. And they still all play I think most of them still play pugs and stuff. They still like CS. It's just kind of like the career path wasn't an option for them. So just wasn't an option they thought they could, follow up. So they just went back to real life.
So it was really a case of right place, right time for you. And I think now's kind of a good time for us to sort of jump forward a little bit to a relatively important part of your career, which at least as far as I can see, right? And tell me if this is an important part of your career as far as you're concerned. But joining this ASDF roster in sort of mid 2016, and that kind of looks like the first kind of super solid, like almost tier 1 roster or potential tier 1 roster that you kind of joined. Now, obviously at the time, the roster was Malta, Lightstep, Alistair, Inns, and Tux, and 4 out of 5 of those players are still sort of competing or in and around the top level of the ANZ Counter-Strike scene. So at the time when you joined this roster, did it sort of feel like this was the best roster that you'd been on so far? And did it feel like the opportunities were starting to arise toward the top end of the scene? Or at the time, were you guys sort of still the guys that were kind of learning the ropes and you weren't necessarily those tier 1 players just yet?
I'm not really sure. I think at the time when that team was put together, the AU scene was like pretty in just like a really bad shape. So we had a space where you could just have like these 3 good, like mechanical up and coming players, and you could put them with Mike or Lightstep, who was he was confident in his leadership abilities, and then Tyler, who was kind of just like that experienced like player who knew, how to play his own game. So Mike could focus on kind of bring the rest of us up. But then kind of turned out that Tyler was also like really, I didn't expect it as much from him, but he was really good at kind of developing everyone and just kind of making sure that everyone got up to speed pretty quick. So like me, Josh, and Ali, that is. But yeah, I think it was just a space where there were no top teams at that time because everyone, I don't know, there were just roster changes happening and people, I think that might have been when Winter Fox went overseas.
I think that was a little bit before.
Maybe?
No, I think that was a bit before because from memory, Dexter's Chiefs were the best team in the region at the time. So this was like around ANZ Champs Season 1, if that gives you some context or some recollection, which was a totally cooked kind of a format. And we don't really want to dive too far into that. But I'm pretty sure Dexter's Chiefs was the best roster at that time when that season started, and then they didn't end up even qualifying for the season finals, which ended up being won by Atletico. And that's something that we're going to sort of get into as well, is the sort of the rivalry between Chiefs and Atletico once that sort of started to kind of kick off. And I guess again, now we can sort of move into that discussion then about Chiefs, right? And this is the first tier 1 organization that you joined, which was the ASDF roster. being moved over into that Chiefs organization. And that sort of seemed to have come about because you guys won ESEA Season 22. So you got that place over at the Global Challenge. You beat Atletico, you beat Avant and SYF, which were all pretty well-established teams at the time. So how did it actually come about? Did you have much to do with the conversation with Chiefs, or, did they kind of come to, maybe I guess in this instance, it would have probably been Lightstep or maybe Tux as kind of the quote-unquote leaders of the team?
I think Mike went to Frank and was like, because they'd already worked together in the past, and or maybe it was Tyler as well. But I think it was Mike, and he was just basically like, because so in that qualifier we beat the current Chiefs team, which I think was like Sicko, Wizard, Danza. Was that if you remember that old lineup? It was those guys. So we beat them in the final, I think, or maybe in a match before. And Mike basically went to Frank and was like, we just beat your team. Do you want to just pick us up? And Frank was like, yeah, sure.
Good old days.
We kind of just swapped. Like, I don't think they like. We didn't have buyouts or anything because we were all. I mean, it was
You weren't signed. You were in ASDF at the time.
3 or 4 years ago. I can't even remember, but yeah, so long ago. Contracts and stuff just weren't really a thing back then, anyway.
So along with that, then I assume like when you joined Chiefs, there was no sort of salary involved or anything like that. No discussions around that. It was just sort of.
I think salary was, it wasn't a thing until maybe a year or like half a year. Actually, maybe only like 4 months later, we kind of realized that we could ask for a salary. But yeah, no, not at that point.
Which is an interesting discussion in itself, because kind of when you joined Chiefs is when you ended up becoming the best team in the region, at least as far as I was concerned. At the time, though, Atletico was the sort of the best team in the region. Did you sort of, like at what point did you guys as a roster start to feel like you were starting to become, real challengers for the top end of the scene? Because I guess just for some context for you and for maybe the viewers as well, you played in the Asia Minor Qualifier just after you joined Chiefs, and you came 5th to 8th, which was like an awful result actually for that roster. You were probably a top 4 team, like easily, and you sort of failed a little bit in that minor qualifier.
That would have been without Tux though, right? Because it would have been a minor qual.
Probably.
So I can't remember who we would have played with, but yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been Tyler, which would have been a big hit because he was a pretty big player. No. Oh, probably Dizzy.
Dizzy and Panic. So you had Inns, Malta, Alistair, Dizzy, and Panic, apparently.
Maybe that was when Mike couldn't play for some reason. I can't remember why, but there was like a weird bit, and like I think I was calling or something. It was just so weird.
So definitely not an ideal time to be in that Chiefs roster. Obviously, not your perfect roster.
Yeah, just stuff was happening, and we just had to use them to fill in. But it was a weird qualifier, and kind of like we were just kind of happy to get knocked out at the end of it. We were like, let's just get out of here.
You also managed to go to ROG Masters at the end of 2016, where you also came 5th to 8th. But in the context of playing against international teams, this would have been not quite your first international event. Obviously, the ESEA Global Challenge, I think, was for you the first international event that you attended. But ROG Masters, a domestic sort of Asian event, and to go there and manage to beat a few of the teams that were kind of competing within Asia, I think is kind of the first time where you started to put in some decent performances against international teams.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so ESEA MDL was kind of a bit of an eye-opener for us, I think, because we kind of got to go and play against these teams who we otherwise never would have, and I think we had a pretty good performance over there. I think we were pretty happy with that. And then we went to ROG Masters, and we were kind of just a little bit, I think, the environment itself at the event wasn't that great. Like, I hate blaming stuff like that, but it affects.
So long ago, it's no one's going to get mad about it, right?
Yeah, no.
But it was pretty rough.
We were playing next to so if you imagine like a normal internet cafe, like you got the lines of tables. So it was the 5, just for the viewers who don't know. It was like the 5, and then you had another team on the opposite side of it, and then across, a meter behind you, there was another one of those 10 computer setups. So we were playing, and then in front of us was I think it was the eHome Dota 2 team, and then the team that we were versing was behind them. And the Dota 2 team the whole time was just yelling comp, like they yell comms so loud, and it was just insane. So we pretty much had no game like audio that whole tournament. Like it was so hard to hear stuff. But but that's also just the environment it was. So we had to adapt to it, and we didn't, and we lost to teams who we probably shouldn't have back then, or I guess we didn't expect to lose against. But yeah, I mean, back then no one was putting in as much work as you need to if you want to be a consistent top team.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of just expected to win that event, I think, and didn't.
Oh, man, you weren't even close to winning that event, right?
Yeah, not even far.
You were in the
Not even
same
close.
group as Leapfrog, which of the players that are kind of still competing, Alex and Tommy from Singapore are probably the only ones that are still kind of relevant in the discussion. There was also a team called Taiwan Z there, which, again, like, when was the last time you saw a Taiwanese team being relatively competitive in Counter-Strike globally? So you did actually beat those guys out. That was the group that you were in. You came second in that group. Then you went into the quarterfinals of that one, and you faced against Risky Gaming. Now, this is a pretty solid roster, actually. Like, Risky Gaming at the time was one of the best teams in the region, I thought, and they did end up making it to the semifinals over you guys 2-0. But to kind of expect you as Chiefs to go into that and actually win, like, I don't know that that's actually a fair assumption, right? Like, was that what you guys were like hoping for? Did you sort of think that you could actually win that event? Because to me, that seems like a pretty far-fetched like sort of stretch for an Australian team that's barely played internationally to be going up against some of the best teams in Asia and sort of expecting to win. So was this like a disappointing result for you guys to not make it out of quarterfinals?
Yeah, and I remember being really like disappointed because I think it wasn't as much like we went in being like, yeah, we're gonna win this event, it's gonna be so easy. But we went in and we playing against, at least like the first few games, we were kind of like really shaky and everyone was just off, and we were just like, I think you're just playing in a new environment, and we just like playing against these new teams who we didn't counter strat at all. Like, no one really like didn't watch any demos or anything, and we just had no idea how they played. So we managed to get through those few teams, but against Risky, we also just like we weren't like playing our own game, and that's the worst way to lose, is when you're playing like you're just playing really, really bad and no one's doing what they're meant to be doing, and like no one's talking and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of one of those games or one of those series, sorry, where you slowly lose because you're not fixing your own mistakes. And it kind of just feels like everyone's just a bit asleep at the wheel. And that's why it was disappointing, I think, was that we lost to ourselves a lot. Like, as they were a pretty good lineup as well. Like, I don't want to discredit them, but at the same time, we definitely didn't really go in like playing ourselves. So, and I think after the ECA finals, where we played the NA teams and did decently well, we kind of had a bit of a warped like understanding of how good we were, or just expectations, stuff like that, I think.
Yeah. Because for me, like in 2016 and towards late 2016, I sort of still see that as kind of the formative years of that Chiefs roster, right? 2017 to me was the breakout year for this roster. And you weren't ever really even still, I thought, until sort of mid 2017, like after you'd qualified for IEM Sydney, considered the best team in the ANZ region. But just before we get into that discussion, again, towards the end of late 2016, you played in the Dreamack Las Vegas Asia Qualifier. I don't know if you remember this event, but you beat Winter Fox and Atletico to make it to the Asia Qualifier.
Oh, yeah.
And then you forfeited your game against Vici. So do you want to tell me what ended up happening there?
So that one was like, so that event had the VAC ban rules as well. So we played with Iron instead of Tyler. And oh no, my camera. And we somehow, like, Iron actually was a pretty good teammate in that tournament. He played really well, put up numbers and stuff. Pretty sure he carried us, to be honest. But we managed to beat Winter Fox somehow. And then it kind of just, we were speaking to Frank about it, and like Dreamhack wasn't going to pay any kind of like flights or anything like that to get us to the qualifier in Asia. So the only option was to go to Perth, and Perth was still going to be way too expensive for us, I think. So we kind of just decided, if we weren't playing with Tyler, like we're not playing with our full lineup, it's probably going to be too much money for a chance to qualify. And so we kind of just decided it wasn't worth it.
So this was like in the Wild West days of Counter-Strike in ANZ and Asia in particular, because it seemed like this was the thing that sort of cropped up a lot, where an ANZ team would qualify for some sort of event or something like that, but you would inevitably have to fly to Asia or fly to Perth or something to actually be able to play in the actual qualifier. You'd like win the ANZ qualifier, and then to play in the Asia qualifier, there was like, okay, well, you got to verse the Chinese teams and you got to verse the Singaporean teams, but obviously you're an ANZ team, so like you're kind of cooked.
Yeah.
Luckily, that's kind of fixed now, and we pretty much have separate ANZ and Asia qualifiers. Anyway, that's a discussion that is not so interesting, and I want to sort of dive into this 2017 kind of thing, because this is where I think you started to finally become like one of the best teams in ANZ, and you probably were the best team in the ANZ region for at least a 6, maybe a bit longer month period. But it didn't actually last that long. So let's see how this is from your perspective, and whether or not maybe I have a warped sense of reality. So at the start of 2017, Lightstep leaves, and you replace him with Pecks. I want to know actually how this sort of changed the dynamic of the team, because you've already sort of alluded to the fact that Lightstep was like the... Again, I kind of use the word father figure. I'm not sure if that's necessarily exactly what it is, but he was very much an older player that had come through as like a veteran, and you guys were the new up-and-comers. But now you've sort of used all of his expertise, and you don't really have much of a use for him anymore, right? Because you're the veterans now. You've been playing for a long time. So what's the mentality here, and why did you get Pecks? Because once he left that Chiefs roster, he sort of just jumped off the face of the earth, right? He really only had that one long stint in Chiefs, and then he was done.
Yeah, so what happened with Mike was like he had like a lot going on in his life. Like he was working full time, and he was he just had a kid, and like there was just a lot going on in his life. And Tyler was kind of like, I can do, like, I want to be the in-game leader, and I want to put that work in that, you know, the in-game leader needs to be putting in. Because it is like, I mean, in these days it's maybe a lot more even now than it was back then, but you're structuring practice, you're coming up with like game plans, you're coming up with like, you're the one who's coming up with the counters, and so, well, especially back then, like he was doing all that kind of stuff that we didn't want to do it. Like we just wanted to shoot and stuff like that. But so we're just like, well, if Mike's not going to be in game leading, we might as well just try and get, you know, an up and comer and just get him up to the same level as the rest of us. And then I think it was Zen League, like season 1 or something. We were playing in that, and we couldn't. The roster locks had like we'd already passed the roster locks, and Pete was on our roster as a sub. So we were kind of just like, well, we have to use him anyway. And I think at the time we were planning on getting hats. So Jordan, who I play with now, and then we were kind of like, well, like we'd like to get him, but we can't get him for Zen League, and it's kind of going to screw us up. So we'll just play with Pete for now. So we did that, and then Pete was actually really impressive and good comms, just like good personality. Like we really like, he's such a good guy. Pete's like the funniest guy. Like I feel like he's a bit underspoken. Like you won't, unless you are friends with him, you won't like get the pearlers, but he's got some gems. He's a good bloke. So we kind of decided that we'd just stick along with him. And I mean, it paid off, because he was a really good player as well. Like he definitely stood up with the rest of us, and was a big reason why we even won that qualifier, to be honest, for IEM Sydney, which I think is, you're right, like when we kind of started to realize we were the best team at the time.
It's now, like at this point in time in 2017, toward the start of 2017, is where you start to see some of the current rosters that we see in ANZ Counter-Strike kind of starting to form, right? You've got Dark-Sided, which is, you're starting to see your Dick Stacey's coming into the discussion, and then you've obviously got your Chiefs roster, which is, you know, yourself and Inns and Alistair and all these kinds of players that are starting to come into the top level of the scene. But at that time, it was actually Athletico that were considered the best in the region, and they had only just joined Tainted Minds before the IEM Sydney qualifier. And I remember going into this qualifier, because again, I casted this qualifier, and I was thinking, like, if Athletico don't win this, it's like, it's unbelievable, right? And then you guys come in, and not only do you beat them in the upper bracket final, but you also beat them in the grand final. So this, to me, was the moment where Chiefs suddenly became the best team in ANZ. And I also feel like this was the moment that ended Tainted Minds' like career. Like, you look at the roster of that team, and you think, like, who's still actually playing? Sonic's done, Infrequent's done, Liaz is still hanging around, but Chutch is gone. And I think
he's hanging around in 100 Thieves. Yeah, he's hanging around.
I think they had Dexter in that roster as well. But like, that team literally died straight after that event. Do you feel somewhat responsible for killing like Tainted Minds, not only as a roster, but maybe some of these guys' careers?
I think the guys who left the game kind of left it for other reasons. But yeah, Chris, I was gonna make fun of Chris for that event, because like they were going in as like the favorites, and then I don't want to toot my own horn, but had a 1.15 rating over the whole tournament, and just like absolutely destroyed in both games. And I don't know, it was just something about like whenever we played them, it kind of felt like individually we just lost. Like we didn't lose because we didn't know what they were doing. We just lost because we were making some like mistakes ourselves where someone dies early round in it's a 4v5, and then you're going to lose like 70% of those rounds. Or just like even when you have an advantageous, like you have the man advantage, someone just goes and throws away their life. So we always lost with things like that because they were just really sharp players, and they had Chutch entering who was just like really sharp and no fear. And then Chris was like, yeah, he was good back then. He's still good now. But he would just like clutch every round and stuff like that, especially with Jay as well, who was doing the same thing. Like, so it was just hard to beat them because individually they were just like a really talented team. But we kind of got our shit together basically, and just for that tournament, I don't know, we kind of just went a bit Super Saiyan, and yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like it didn't really stop after that tournament either, because if we now sort of move into the discussion surrounding IEM Sydney, right? You've obviously qualified for IEM Sydney. It's a big deal. You're the first ANZ team to qualify for the first massive event in ANZ. And so IEM Sydney 2017 is a big deal, right? And everyone's sort of looking at Chiefs to be a super team sort of kind of thing. Like you guys are the representatives from ANZ. You guys have to kind of do something. And then you have Australis as your first game.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like your first tier 1 event as well, like you've never played against some of the teams of this caliber. And then you get thrown in against, I guess at the time, they probably weren't considered the best team in the world, but even still, they were pretty good. I think you ended up losing 16-1 in that game from memory.
I think it was 16-3.
Okay, well, let's...
I don't want to discredit...
You're at least 3 times as good as my assumption.
We were bad, but we weren't that bad. Because I remember Pete like clutched a 1v3 on the pistol round, and we were like, no! And we was like so like hype. And then we just got anti-eco the next round, like absolutely destroyed. And then pretty much the whole T side, I think we got 2 rounds or something like that.
Yeah.
But
I don't know who I spoke to after that event, because I was doing like this weird sort of interviewer role, like Facebook Live interviewer kind of thing. So I was talking to players. Yeah. And I don't know if it was you. I know I did speak to you a couple of times at that event, but I do remember someone saying from your roster, someone saying they're just on like a different level, and that you'd like learn so much. Not even just so much about how you guys just got absolutely dumpstered like aim-wise and like firepower-wise, but the way that they moved, I think, was specifically what you sort of alluded to, or someone alluded to. So did it kind of feel like you were playing against like another team that was like so cerebral that you weren't even understanding Counter-Strike on the same level?
Yeah, I think it might have been me, by the way, in that interview, because I remember saying something like that. Like, I think basically we just realized, like, or I don't know, looking back on it now, we probably didn't realize this at the time, but like we were just so bad that we would have telegraphed everything we're doing to them, and they're just like, okay, well, they're going B here for sure, because like this guy dropped out apps and gave us that sound cue. And like, but we didn't realize it back then. We're like, damn, they're just so smart. They're just like, they're reading us. They're just like, we went A this round, so they think like that we must be going B next round or something, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think we were just really, really bad at the time, and they were all just comparatively, and they just absolutely destroyed us. So we kind of learnt where we belonged in the world of Counter-Strike, and that like we shouldn't get big heads or anything, because we definitely were not a good team. But that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing to know. Like, you got to learn that at some point in your career, otherwise you just, I don't know, you kind of get complacent.
Okay.
So it's a good lesson to learn.
It is an interesting point that you say that, right? Where you don't want to get big heads or anything like that, because pretty much straight after that, you go into the game against, I think you played against Renegedes, right?
Yeah.
And you 15-0 them in the first half on train. So it's kind of like you just get dumpstered, and then now you're supposed to be going up against the best team in ANZ, or the best team from ANZ, which obviously has a couple of players from international teams. And you've sort of come out there and you've just 15-0'd them. Now, it didn't end up being a 16-0. I think most of the domestic audience was kind of hoping for a 16-0 there, to be honest. I'm sure you guys were looking for a 16-0 as well. But it was 16-5 the scoreline. Did that sort of feel like a kind of a vindicating moment for you, where you were like, you know what? Like, everyone's talking about Renegades and no one's talking about Chiefs, but we're still those guys from ANZ that can compete.
Yeah, I think, especially after the loss to Australis, we were just like, I think we just wrote that off for that tournament. At least we were just like, whatever. We just got destroyed. They're way better than us. Full focus on Renegades. We know that we can beat these guys, because we didn't think they were like we knew they were a good team, but they also weren't at that level that the new roster is.
Yep.
So we're kind of like, we can definitely beat these guys, especially, if we get, especially when we found out it was Train, and we were like, if we get CT side, we're gonna have a big advantage. Like, so yeah, we managed to get CT side, and I think it was pretty much just Josh, like Ins, just destroyed them. Like, I'm pretty sure I had like 2 frags at the half or something, and Josh had like 37 or something. But anyway, he just absolutely destroyed them, and I think we just caught them off guard. Like, they just didn't expect the basic stuff to get shut down so easily, because they were kind of just doing some simple, like, they were doing like basic Ivy splits or something, and Josh was just getting 3Ks when they were coming out, and they kind of just weren't expecting us to have good fundamentals in the game, which I think something that was actually really strong for us was just fundamentally we had like a pretty good understanding of how rounds should play out, but we kind of would fall at like the final hurdle of like individual decisions would sometimes be just like round losing. But like on CT side especially, we had a really good understanding of like just rotations and how to support each other, and we had like really good comms. That was something we worked on pretty hard. Like Tyler was always really hard. Like if people's comms were bad, he'd be on their case, like making sure they're speaking, they're comming and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think we just caught them off guard, and they just weren't expecting it. And then the pressure piles on. You're like you're 8-0 down, you're 10-0 down, you're 12-0 down. It's like there's so much pressure on them to be the team that beats us when there's no pressure on us to beat them. So
can I just say, I've looked at the stats for this game, because I was interested. You piqued my interest when you said Josh was sort of smashing everyone. And he did indeed smash everyone. He was plus 17 for that game.
Yeah.
26-9. Do you want to have a guess at what your scoreline might have been?
I don't know, like minus 21 or something. I was a complete bot that game.
It was minus 10. You were 5-15 for the whole series.
Yeah, I actually did nothing. Like I just remember playing that game, and I was like, I got up after, and I was like, Josh, I did nothing. You just
literally got hard carried.
You played for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, everyone else played decently, I think, but Josh was just like, yeah. But
everyone
too fair, they're coming on Ivy. They're coming back red. I'm getting no com. I'm like, Josh, where's the com? And then he gets like 4, and I'm like, you know what?
Don't worry about it, mate.
I baited for you. It's all good. So basically, all of Josh's frags because of me. But he just like absolutely steamrolled him, and it was like I was playing so bad, and I was like kind of in my own head, and I was like, oh, okay, I got to play better. And then I just realized it didn't really matter. So
no,
just let Josh do it all.
Yeah, sometimes that's just how it is. Okay, and then we go into this game against North. Now, this is like a big one as far as I'm concerned for Chiefs as a roster and for kind of ANZ Counter-Strike in general, because this seems like the first game that really puts you as a roster on the mark internationally. Not only have you just beaten Renegedes, you've also now upset North and basically knocked them out of the tournament. In fact, I think you did knock them out of the tournament. So did this kind of feel like this was like the first moment where you were like, okay, you know what? Maybe we can actually compete with these kind of tier 1, quote unquote, tier 1 teams. And how did you feel about that game? Because I remember that being such a massive moment for like the scene as a whole.
Yeah, that game was just like, I don't know. We were really confident on nuke. So we came up, like we had this one strat on T side where we basically like naded the door, and then we like threw this one smoke, and we just knew how to react off it really well. Like we'd practiced it. Like we had like 5 or 6 variations on the strat, and we knew which rounds were good rounds to do those variations. So going into nuke, we were just super confident on our T side, and obviously CT nuke, like you kind of hope to get a pretty good lead. So because we started CT, we were pretty happy with that. But I think we were down like 10-5 or something. Like we had a really bad CT side, but we were just, I don't know, just going to the T side, we were just like, we know we can easily win this game, like with this strat basically. And yeah, I think it was, I don't know. I think they had so much, again, there's so much pressure on them and not on us, but yeah, I think, yeah, it was pretty huge for us. I think just as a confidence thing, we were like, we came out of that game, we were just like, damn, we can actually, like, we could make stages, like we just have to beat Optic now, and we're on stage, and then like maybe we actually are, because they were like ranked 3rd or something, or 4th or something in the world, right? Like it was something like that. They were.
I don't remember, but they were definitely up there. Like they were. This was, I think, one of the first games, or not games, but like one of the first tournaments that North had been at as an org. So they were kind of like a big discussion point at the time. And of course now North is not a major deal really anymore in comparison to some of the other European organizations. But at the time, this was like a massive deal. Like no one knew who Chiefs was, and everyone knew who North was.
Yeah.
And now you've beaten them and knocked them out of the tournament.
Because they came in and they offered like, I think they had record-breaking like at the time salaries and stuff like that. Like they were offering, and facilities, like because it was FC Copenhagen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they had these just huge backing, huge facilities, all that kind of stuff, and And yeah, we were just like the Aussie guys getting paid like $200 to just like play some games. Like it was just a really different ballpark. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was just funny. Like upsets happen, and like a lot of teams have had upset moments like that, but ours was kind of like different because no one really expected anything from the Oz representative. And then
you guys
like,
were supposed to
take
go
down those guys.
0-3, get knocked out, and basically get 16-0'd by everyone.
Yeah,
Because
well,
this
yeah.
was even before Australian Counter-Strike was like even like marginally respectable, right? If you think about it, at the time, there had never been an Australian team outside of the Vox and Immunity cores, which obviously then became Renegedes at the time, who had done anything internationally. So it was the consideration, or the assumption mostly, I thought, was like, okay, if it's not Renegades or it's not the Immunity core, like none of the other Australian teams kind of matter. And then you guys kind of put us on the map a little bit, I felt like. So that was a massive result. And then you go into this game against Optic, where, as you say, you've got a chance of making it to playoffs. I don't know that this was a match that would have put you on the stage, although from memory, Optic did end up on the stage. So
no, it was because it was 2-2, and it was,
that's right.
You
It was
just
only
had to win 3, right?
Yeah, it was only 8 teams, so you didn't even have to really do that much. You just had to win 3 games in your thing.
Just had to win a BO1 against Optic,
all BO1s, and you get 16-4, right? So like the storyline starts so beautifully for Chiefs. Right, you've gone through, you've lost against Astralis, but then you've beaten Renegades, you've beaten North, and now you're against Optic, who's maybe not the best team at this competition. You know, if you can upset Renegades and you can upset North, maybe you can upset Optic. And I can remember watching this game because, again, I was sort of just sitting downstairs in the ESL studio. I think I was hanging out with Steph, who would have been your manager at the time, right? And she was basically like bouncing off the roof with like frustration and stress, and you know how she gets, right?
Yeah.
You end up losing 11-4 in the first half. They're on T side of train, and it just looks like everything's over, right? And was this like, did you sort of feel like this downward spiral as you were playing that game? You know, every round that kind of goes past, it was like, okay, you know, down the hole, further and further down the hole. And like you get to a point where you're thinking like, well, they're never going to get out of it. At least that was what it was like for me. Like I just saw 5 or 6 rounds go by, and I was like, they're done.
Yeah. No, we just didn't have the experience, because like, so in my current team, I mean, it happened against Order like 2 days ago or whatever, or whenever this gets released in Road to Rio. And it doesn't matter how far like behind we are or whatever, we always have the mentality of like, you know, we know our own game, we know like that we've come back from, you know, rounds like, or games like this before, so we know it's possible. But back then I think we weren't as confident in ourselves, especially like against these teams. Like these teams are obviously pretty above us in terms of just like the experience they have and all that kind of stuff. So every round you lose, you just start, you know, you're like, oh, like I got to make a play now. Like I need to be the one who wins the next round. And then someone will do that. They'll lose, like they throw away the lead, and then it just becomes a spiral of like every round someone's trying to make a play that wins the round, instead of just like trusting that your fundamentals are better than their fundamentals, which is something that like you kind of have to do as a team. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard, like especially versus someone who, or players who by their own right were better than us individually. So we kind of just got disrespected on, I think, a bit. Like they were just taking aim duels and just beating us, and we were kind of like just getting further and further down. But you know, still a good run.
Definitely. And like as far as the first performance was concerned for a team going into a tier 1 event that had never played at a tier 1 event before, I think everyone was kind of stoked with the result that Chiefs were able to pull off. There was this sort of air of like, you know, they didn't make playoffs, but like at least we're not irrelevant anymore. At least we're not the teams that everyone looks to just get shit on by basically everyone. So it was a good performance, I thought. And you know, the way that I sort of sum it up is so close yet so far. But whatever.
It was good because we also got a bit of credit. Like I think it was MSL or KGB. One of them did an interview afterwards. And in it he basically said like, I don't want people to think that they fluked to beat us or anything like that. Like obviously we can say we underperformed and stuff like that, but they had like this strat that just like they basically was just saying they played it well and that's why they won. And I think for us that was like a really good, like that's something that was good for us because we were really confident in this strat that we used, and like our T side basically as a whole on Nuke, and it was kind of like it was just nice to know that we didn't like they didn't think that we just locked or anything. Like we beat them because like off our own merit. And I think that was just important for us in a confidence sense that we could come up with things that could like just basically bamboozle these other teams from other regions. Like they've never seen that stuff before, and like we can use it to just get a win against them.
Yeah, I've always found that it's like pretty important to get props from a respected figure, because that sort of really elevates people's opinions of you quite quickly, more so than even if, like, let's say you got those results, but if they come out and said, oh, you know, we just played like shit and we were having an off day, people would be like, oh, whatever, you know, Chiefs, they just got lucky kind of thing.
And sometimes that's the case though. Like sometimes you can just say, you know, like, well played to them. We got outplayed today. We just like kind of we just weren't playing ourselves, or like, you know, this thing was going wrong. And that's fair. Like that happens as well. But I think it's nice. It's happened a few times throughout kind of the different teams I've played on where we've had, like, I think we when we beat, I think it was EG on Nuke or Liquid. I think Device had an interview and he was basically just like, he was asked what he thought about the upsets, and he was like, we're watching the games, they're actually just like fundamentally really good, and like the calling seems really on point. So I think Chris got a lot out of that. Like he was like, it's like validating to know that, you know, you like these top players can watch you and be like, these guys are actually like, their fundamentals are good and they know what they're doing. So it's really important to have that, I think.
Make sure you pass that on one day when a team beats you.
Yeah, no. Any team who beats me, luck. We play bad luck. Anyway.
Shit players.
Shit players, they got lucky.
All right. Let's move on from IEM Sydney then, because we've spent a bit of time on that discussion. This is the point now where you end up going to WCG 2017. And like, I don't even really remember this event, to be honest.
Did that happen?
And it seems like you don't remember it either. What? You won the event, by the way. I don't know if you remember
No. It was a qualifier, right?
No.
We won the qualifier. No. We did. No.
World Cyber
WCG?
Arena Asia Pacific 2017.
What?
You beat Boot. I'm looking at it right now. Unless Liquidpedia is making something up. Tux, Inns, Malta, Alistair, Pecks have beat Boot, Dreamscape, Mongol, Signature, Rekka, Grayhound, MVP.
No. That was definitely a qualifier because we played from Perth.
Really?
Yeah. Because WCG was a tournament that it kept getting delayed, and we just never went because the tournament never happened. So we went to Perth. I remember because we had a CG event one weekend,
right,
and we all flew from there with the Grayhound guys at the time, who was like Urcast, Mon, Sean, and that's actually the first time I would have met Will, who's like the manager now for our team and like one of my good friends. So we flew from there to Perth, and we were like just chilling with them, and just like we had drinks with them afterwards and stuff like that. And yeah, we just played. I remember we were playing on like 70 ping, and we just managed to beat. I think we just beat all the Asian teams.
You beat all these good teams, right? And so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, because this seems like the first like really solid result, quote unquote, internationally, even if you were playing from Perth. You know, to beat Boot, who at the time were considered pretty good, and like Mongols in particular. Like this is probably after they've started to slow down a little bit. Like they were really sick in 2015, 2016. But even still, big result for an Aussie team. Signature, who I guess, you know, no one really cared much about Thai CS back then. But now the Thai CS region is pretty good. You beat out Grayhound as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Grayhound back then was... So that was... I remember at that was the event when Urk asked me, and he was like, hey bro, I think we're gonna get Dexter. And I was like, all right, man.
Cool, bro.
I was like, cool, man. All right, sounds good. And I was like, I remember back then I was like, shit, they're gonna get better. For sure. Because like I think they were replacing Mon at the time.
Yeah, Prackham was on the team at the time. And Moe.
Yeah, I think, and Moe. Oh, actually, it would have been Moe.
Burn, Grab, Moe, Urk, and Prackham.
Yeah. So I think Moe went after that event. And Chris came in. And yeah, that was worrying. And then I think Mon went after that for someone, I can't remember who.
And this
who would have come in? Oh, Dick Stacey. That's it.
This is actually a good sort of segue into what I want to talk about a little bit, because this is now the time where it kind of feels like Chiefs have hit their peak and they're slowly starting to like not fall so much, but other teams are kind of catching up in a way.
Yeah.
So you miss out on ROG Masters 2017. You lose to Atletico, which was actually at that time the old Darksider roster.
Yeah, the Darksider guys.
And then the Kings had formed at that time as well, who you also lost to in that qualifier. And it really starts to feel like now Chiefs' dominance within ANZ is coming to an end. So did it did it feel like that internally? Like, did you recognize that pretty quickly? Because obviously very soon after this point was when you jumped ship to Grayhound. Did you kind of feel like Chiefs are starting to slow down a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think the WCG event was kind of like the last event where, yeah, we did like, because versing all those teams, like you get the confidence from beating all these Asian teams. You kind of realize like you're like, oh well, you don't realize you're like, we are the best team in Asia now, or like we're one of the best teams in Asia now, and that was something that we like. You kind of, it can make you complacent pretty easily. I think we definitely did get complacent. But I think, I don't know, we kind of had like, I think we definitely probably should have made roster changes within that period of time, because there were such good players out and about in the Oz scene who we probably could have strengthened the team with. Like, even like, I don't know, I think, I mean, there's like a lot to look back on. Like, there's so many rosters that could have been formed back then that would have been basically super teams back then, like the Oz super team, and probably would have been a lot better than us. And I think that's what eventually happened with Kings, was they just had a big investor or like whatever come in and be like, we can make this super team. And they pretty much had, it's like, the way I look at it is like, every team back then, you had like 4 good players, and then you'd always have one player who like could have been replaced, basically.
Okay.
Which is a bad way to look at it, but like that was kind of true for just every single team. And like, replacing that one player brings the team up to a level where they're going to be the best in the region. And that's like, so for us, I think we could have probably replaced Pete earlier than we did. And I think that's not because he wasn't like, I don't want to throw shade at Pete, because he was like a really good player and everything and a really good teammate, but he had problems with like his own confidence, where like, I mean, he told us, I remember he told us a few times, like, you know, if you guys want to replace me, it's all good. Like, I understand why and stuff like that. And we'd be like, Pete, we don't want to replace you. Like, stop saying that. Just like, be confident. Just don't, like, I don't know. It's just like, it's a really bad sign if someone on your team is saying,
you can
like,
replace me.
It's all good. I won't be offended if you replace me. And you're like, you're a good player. I don't know, like, why would we replace you? But because of that, you get to a point where like that person isn't confident in anything they're doing in their own game, and they're not confident. Like it just means they start making no decisions in a round, which is the worst thing that a player can do. Like, so instead of being like, should I push here? Should I get info here or whatever? They just like, if I do nothing, I can't do anything wrong. And I think he started getting into that mindset where if he just kind of tried to play like purely as a support player and not do anything aggressive, which is what he was good at. Like, he was sharp, he was good at being aggressive. Then he couldn't do anything wrong. And that's kind of where a player like needs just a mentality check. I think they need to reset mentally. Otherwise, you know, there's just so many rounds where it impacts and it just affects us as a team. So I think that was kind of true for a lot of, sorry, to go back to my point, that's kind of true for like a lot of teams back then. Like, every team had one player who kind of either had a bad mentality or they weren't putting in work or just something like that. And if you took that player out of that team and put in, you know, if you picked someone else from another team, then that team suddenly becomes the best in Australia. And I think at the time, when we did decide to replace Pete, we tried to get Hats again, and he'd already kind of signed up for, well, not like, he just, you know, decided that he wanted to play with the Kings guys, which makes sense, you know, looking back at the roster that it was back then, because it was pretty stacked. And yeah, we basically just waited too long, I think, just making a change when we probably should have made it earlier.
So this is actually quite interesting then as well, because pretty much right after that is when you end up going to WESG with Order. Now, obviously, for anyone that's not aware, WESG has those nationality rules. And at the time, Order, I think, had like Sicko, who was obviously a New Zealander, and there must have been one other New Zealander on that roster. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got you, and I think they got you and Ins to come in. So it was yourself, Hats, Liaz, Emag, and Ins, I believe, was the roster that went over there. You guys ended up actually winning WESG against like legit kind of competition that had proper rosters, right? MVP, they're all from Korea, right? So they don't have to make a roster change. Boot Dreamscape, they might have had, although it looks like, you know, I think that's actually like their legit roster, just having a quick look at it as well. So what did it kind of feel like playing in this sort of quasi Chiefs Order mixed sort of team, you know, because this is exactly what you're talking about. And actually, now that I look at it in hindsight, it was actually Burn, not Ins. It was Hats, Liaz, Emag, and yourself and Burn.
Josh played the qualifier with us, so I don't know what happened. Who's missing from that lineup? Why? Oh, wait, no. I just thought I had a recollection, but I didn't. Who else was in that roster? Because they just had Simon, right? So it was Liaz, Simon, Trav, Wizard,
It
sorry,
says...
Emag, and who was the last one?
I'm not sure. I've got to try and remember. Maybe that was like around the time
And
where
Jordan, and Jordan.
but he would have been Aussie, right?
Yeah, maybe
So-
they had.
I think it was
They
kind of
kicked-
around the time where like Wizard might have left and they didn't have a core fifth kind of thing.
Maybe, because I know at that time, I mean, spoiler alert, they were trying to get Josh at the time,
Mhm.
and that was when he was on Chiefs. But I don't know if that time, no, because he would have already gone to Tainted at that time, because Tainted was the reason he couldn't come to the event with us, because they blocked him from. They were like, no, you got to stay in Oz and practice with us or something like that. And then he was like, okay, I can't come, and we were like, okay, that's cool. So then that's why we got Cal to fill in, because Josh kind of got blocked. But yeah, I can't think why there'd be two of us. Anyway, there was two of us. That was a weird event. Like, I think Jordan was AWPing because Simon wasn't there, and we were kind of just doing like the same strat over and over. Like Emag was like, "Run it back, we're doing it again." And we just did the same thing, and it was just working because we had like Cal was just entering, and he's obviously sharp as, and then Leah's clutching. You just can't go wrong, really.
So like,
I think
I kind of want to get into how it sort of felt to play with these guys, right? Because these have like traditionally been your rivals, and some of them pretty much still are, right? So what kind of like team dynamic was it in that Order Chiefs Grayhound, I guess, esque roster that you went and played WESG with? Was it like, you know what, let's just have some fun, let's kind of fuck around? Or were you sort of thinking like, maybe I'm going to try and learn something that could help me later on down the track when I play against Kings? Because it was predominantly the Kings/Order roster.
Yeah, I think it helped. It helped a little bit with playing them because I just knew some of the strats. Like, so Emag, there was this like strat on train which they just called Fnatic, which was like smoke back green, smoke CT con, and run out SL as 3. And we did it like we just did it so many times, and like all these different and like just a few variations on it. Just like we were basically like Emag was just laughing the whole time while calling. Like we were just kind of having fun the whole time, pretty much. Like not taking it overly. Like obviously we wanted to win and we were trying to win and stuff, but we were still just having a laugh, basically. But then in the future playing, whenever I saw those smokes, I was like, they're doing Fnatic! And like, we just wait and watch us sell, and then a few came out. Or if they were doing a variation, I kind of knew what they were doing as well. So it was good in that regard, but I think most of the time, like for most stuff, it was kind of just like, it was fun playing with people I just haven't had the chance to play with yet or since. So it was good.
Did it ever leave a feeling in your mind where you were like, I kind of wish I got to play with them more?
I think definitely with Liaz Jay, because he's just a really good teammate as a whole, and he's just a funny guy. Like just hanging out with him or like hang out with all of them. They're all actually like. Thing is, I was probably already friends with most of them before that point in terms of just after events and stuff, having a laugh, having a beer and stuff. Like especially Jordan, we'd hung out a lot around the IEM Sydney time because he lived in Sydney and we had drinks and stuff afterwards.
Thanks for the invite, by the way.
Yeah, well, it got lost in the mail, man.
Still coming.
But yeah, still coming. It's all right. Next year, not this year, but yeah, it was nice. It was just nice socially playing with those guys and just getting to know them a bit better. But yeah, Jay's definitely like someone who like obviously he's an incredible player and you can tell that by where he's at. But yeah, it was just really good playing with him. And Emag I remember playing with, because I got to play with Emag. I played with him once before when we had a minor qualifier after Winterfox. So Winterfox had died, I think, and he'd come back and he was looking for a team right before Kings. And we got to play with him because Tyler couldn't play. And he was just like before he was in-game lead, I feel like something happened when he swapped to in-game leading. He just like, he didn't get to put himself in the positions that he used to, but he used to be like one of the best lurkers in Oz. Like he was so smart with it. And I remember watching him and like just the way he played out rounds was like incredible, like U2 usage and stuff like that. And he was like, I remember in that qualifier, that's when I wanted to, well, that's probably when we should have picked him up or tried to pick him up if he was not going to go to Kings already. But yeah, he was, yeah. Those two players, like the two who really good. I think yeah, I don't know, all the players. They're all really good players, and it's like it's nice to play with a different group of people because I really only got to play with I played with the Aftermind guys. That was kind of like one team, and then Chiefs, and that was or ASDF, and that's the second team. I never really played with like any other teams other than that. Like I didn't bounce around.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the kind of guys that has stuck with teams. You know, even from like Grayhound now, you've been in that roster for it sort of feels like 2 years, maybe more now, I guess. But we will get to that. And before we do, this is now like basically around the time this event ends up happening is when Inns leaves Chiefs as well. So we've already sort of talked about the fact that writing was on the wall, it seems like. You know, was this kind of a time for Inns? I don't know, like if you know this or if you want to speak for him. But did you ever chat with him and sort of he was like, you know what, I got to get out, man. Like the writing's on the wall. I'm leaving.
No,
or did he just sort of dog the boys kind of thing?
No. He was actually pretty open with it all. Like I remember we were at, I don't know when it was. We were overseas somewhere, so it must have been a tournament somewhere. But I can't remember when. But it would have been before WESG because he was already on Tainted at that time. But it was I honestly can't remember. But we were somewhere, and it was before we went to New York because we went to New York as a team, and that was the last tournament we had as a team because Ali was going to Kings and Josh was going to Tainted, and that was like, or they'd already left, and that was kind of our last tournament together. But it must be before that because I remember Josh getting a message and being like, "Oh, I just got offered to join Kings, and like they're offering this much, like they're offering a salary which is just higher than what we're getting." And I think that was like, I think he knew it was a better team as well, so it was just all around. It was like a good choice for him. Like it was a better team, there was more money. Like what's there to lose? Might as well go and see what it's like. And then I think what happened is he got the offer for Kings, and I remember he talked to me about it a bit. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know what he was thinking. Like in his I don't want to speak for him or anything, but I just remember him saying like, I got this offer from Kings, and then once Tainted found out that he was leaving us, they made him an offer as well, and it was like more money or something like that. And I was like, well, Kings is going to be the better team. You're going to earn prize money through them. They're probably going to be better. And then I think he kind of just went, yeah, but more money's more money, and went with the Tainted offer. Especially because Tainted at the time was still a good team as well. They weren't a bad team.
And actually, from memory at the time, like we now in hindsight know that Tainted team didn't work out particularly well at all. But I think in hindsight, it kind of looked like a bit of a super team as well, to be honest. So I can kind of understand why he might have wanted to go to that Tainted roster.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a bad, I don't know. I mean, obviously, hindsight, terrible choice, Josh, idiot. But like now, without the info, I was kind of like not the worst. Yeah. I think around the same time, he might have got an offer for like a Renegedes or something. I don't know. He was a sought after player at that time. He was a very good, very, very good player. But he had a lot of offers, and I think he basically just went with like the most secure, most pay one. And obviously Tainted, they could have been a good team.
Yeah.
Looking back.
Okay, so you then end up in like this Chiefs roster, which is, you're still one of basically the founding members alongside Tux. But it starts to feel less like the ASDF roster because obviously Alistair and Inns have now left, and more like the new era Chiefs that we saw, like the Tux era Chiefs, which was ending up, the roster was you, Tux, Texter, Sterling, and Flicks for this season of CGP, which I'm going to kind of quote as like your last hurrah with this roster. So if you remember, you actually ended up winning this season of CGP. It was season 13 and probably, honestly, one of like the last actual seasons of CGP. Yeah. Now, Grayhound didn't play in that because they were playing in the ROG Masters in 2017. But, at this point, did you sort of like feel like you were still part of the team, or was there like a bit of a feeling like, you know what, this isn't the team that I sort of joined at the start?
I think I kind of got like a... So like the timelines are kind of all meshed together, but like when Josh was... So Josh was trialing with Kings, right? For like 2 weeks. And then when he got the offer from Tainted, he kind of was like... He was already kind of committed with Kings, but like hadn't signed anything or anything. So he was kind of just like, all right, I'm going to go to this. I'm going to take this offer. And then when he told Kings, they were like, oh, who should we get then? We're thinking Ali or Liam. And then Josh was like, well, you already have an AWPer, so get Liam because he's like the anchor player, and that's what they wanted. And he told me that he was like, I told them that they should pick you up, basically. And I think I'm not sure. I think obviously they decided to go with Ali. And I'm not sure if that's because like I think I played pretty bad at WESG with them. So I'm not sure if that was it or what. But anyway, they ended up going with Ali, and at that point, that's kind of when I was like, yeah, I guess if they offered, I'd probably leave Chiefs, and that's kind of when I'd mentally like been like accepted that at some point I was gonna go to another team. And so yeah, it's just I don't know. The team environment was so different to and that's not to say like I didn't like any of the guys in the team or anything like that. It was just different to the team that I'd come up with, and yes, I guess not winning as well. Like when you're losing games and you're kind of like accepting that it's like that you're okay with losing that. That's like a bad point to be in, I think, in any kind of competitive sport. So kind of got to that point, and then it was actually after we won that event, we were having drinks at the Airbnb afterwards, and I got this message from Irk that was just like, "Hi Liam, you want to join my team?"
Classic Irk text.
I know, it was so funny, and I was like,
yes.
So like we were sitting around the table, and I was like, "I'll go to the bathroom," and just like went to my bed and was basically like, "Yeah, I'd be keen." Like joining the best team. Well, I'd like what I thought was the best team in Oz at the time. I think they were kind of like
they probably
disputed.
weren't the best team at the time, but there was rumblings and discussions that they probably would be the best team.
I think
at some point.
I think they might have been the best team. I think that was like right after they'd qualified, because didn't they qualify for something over?
Okay, so how about this then?
Over Kings?
This will give you some context, right? Because this is what I wanted to talk about next, was the ESL Pro League Season 7 APAC division sort of thing that ended up happening, which was the first season of APAC. And you were still playing in Chiefs at the time. This was actually your last event with Chiefs. And
we lost at Atletico.
You lost this event, and it was Order and Grayhound that came first and second. Order actually ended up... the way that I'm looking at this... Order? It was Order and Grayhound. And it wasn't like first or second. It was like two teams qualified through, and they didn't play the grand final. So it was Order and Greyhound that qualified. Chiefs come fourth, and Tainted Minds comes third. And so this was like
the Tainted Minds?
Yeah, Tainted Minds, which is the Chacha Ofnu Zusi Yam Ins roster.
Oh, right. I do not remember that LAN. Was it a LAN?
No, it wasn't a LAN. This was not a LAN, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
This would have just been an online quote-unquote season. But you guys... did lose to Order in that one, and then you lost to Tainted Minds a bit later on down in the lower bracket. So you play in that, and that's like the last event. And this, I mean, obviously you've already mentioned you're kind of like looking at greener pastures and stuff. And I don't know whether this would have been before your conversation with Urcast or after your conversation with Urcast.
Oh.
Based on the timeline, it seems like it was
after. Yeah.
So like they're already looking to replace, I guess in this instance it's Burn, right? That gets replaced by you.
Yeah, and we were already talking contracts and or like with Frank and stuff. We were already going through all that kind of stuff at this point,
right?
I think. Yeah.
So that's an interesting timeline then, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think I told, so basically when we were discussing it all, I was kind of like, I really want to tell Tyler, because he's been like, I wanted to tell him straight away basically that like I got this offer, and that like, you know, I was pretty keen that if everything worked out on the contract side of stuff, that I was probably going to take it. And I don't think he would have blamed me or anything back then for wanting to join Grayhound at the time, because it was kind of like the one. Grayhound was the team that we had the most respect for, I think, back then. Like in terms of like, we liked all the players. They were just great guys, and like it's impossible not to like Urcast. Just like such a nice guy, and you could see like they'd been grinding since like such a long time. Like back when we started basically as well. And we kind of came up together and all that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of respect for them. But yeah, I wanted to tell Tyler straight away, but kind of just wasn't like, you know, people said that I shouldn't, and so I just had to wait a little bit. But eventually, I think it was probably before these games happened, I told Tyler, and I was like, look, this is what's going on. And he was like, yeah, it's all like understandable, it's all good. But like, I think it was like a little bit cut, because it's kind of like the last.
You were the last mate from ASDF.
The last guy who left, which is a bit sad. But yeah, so basically I think I told him already, and we kind of like at the end of all the negotiations and stuff, it was just decided that I'd just play out this event with the guys, so they didn't have to bring someone else in and try and teach them everything in like 3 days or something. So, and I think at that point I might have even been calling in Chiefs. I can't remember if Tyler took over again, or if it was me. But like basically it was like, this will be our last tournament. We'll just play it out and then I'll leave. So yeah, wasn't a great tournament though, sadly.
Bit of conflict of interest there, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Well,
when you know that you're joining Grayhound and you're
Yeah.
playing against them in a qualifier. Obviously, I'm not
Well,
insinuating anything, but like it's just funny in hindsight that
I don't know. I didn't know. I don't think. Sorry, it wasn't confirmed,
Right.
but it was kind of like, yeah, it was a bit. It was
Because
kind of like
the
bad.
irony obviously is that they end up going overseas and you've like literally joined that roster that you
Well, they didn't.
lost to.
They didn't go overseas, did they? Because they went to. Because the next step of that was the LAN final, where we played MVP and Mongols, because they all came to Sydney for
Right.
that tournament,
That's true.
and it was the qualifier. Because I remember going, because I went to that with Greyhound.
Yep.
Which is the yeah.
But
which
you
is the
did
weird
come
bit.
second at that event and you didn't
Yeah.
qualify for that particular event with Chiefs. So
Yeah. So kind of
bit weird of a way that
Bit
that
weird.
sort of worked out, but obviously great for you. So I have a few
All
questions.
good?
Yeah, you're like pretty happy with that. I have a few questions surrounding this Greyhound move because I actually remember the time period where that happened. Everyone kind of knew that something was going to happen. And I guess for some people that are maybe a little bit more into the scene than I was at the time, or like, a little bit more involved with the players, they probably all knew what was happening. At least everyone knew something was happening. And from my perspective, I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that it was going to be a big roster move between the three teams. So it seems like you being picked up by Greyhound is kind of what started this three-way shuffle between Greyhound, Tainted, and Chiefs. Because if you remember, it was Burn that went to Tainted, you went to Greyhound, and then obviously someone must have joined Chiefs from that at that point, but I can't remember who that was.
Yeah, who did they get?
But it was you that started all of that like shenanigans, right?
I think so. What happened was, so Irk messaged me and I was like, keen. And then somehow Josh, oh no. So it's pure luck, right? So after that event, because Tainted lost to us, I think at that event, I think we beat them because we won the
At
CG.
Pro League
at,
Season 7?
at the CG, the last CG lane, I think it was.
No, you lost to Tainted at CG.
Did we?
Sorry, no,
In the
you would have
final?
beaten them. You would have beaten them because you won that event.
Yeah. Okay, so we beat Tainted, and then so like that night, Irk messaged me, and then I was keen, all that already sorted. Next day, Josh messaged me and was like, "Hey man, you want to join Tainted? We're gonna replace Charch." And I was like, "Okay, now I have two. Like now I need to pick." And I kind of learnt from Josh's lesson that it didn't matter. Like Tainted were offering like a better salary and stuff, but at the time I knew that the Greyhound roster was going to be the roster who won everything. Or I believe that if with me joining them, we could be that team. And I think I'm pretty sure they'd already started winning like a few things, and that's when I was like, yeah, these guys definitely, like just the way they played was different to other Oz teams because they just had good fundamentals, and that's kind of like just how I like to play as well, or like how I think is the right way to play. So I decided to go with, so Josh came and said, "We're getting rid of Connor. Do you want to join?" And I was like, probably gonna go with Greyhound. And then I had to I told Chiefs about both offers, and then I think Frank was like, "Well, I want to try I'm gonna try sell you Tainted and see like if they'll pay more than like the Greyhound would for the buyout or whatever."
Right.
So basically, tried to like get the most out of me, and it was kind of like stressful for me because I was like, I really just want to be in Greyhound, and like I think at the end of the day, Will was basically just like, whatever, like let's just get him, let's just pull the trigger, get him, like stop any buyout like shit from blocking it or whatever. I think Irk was a big part of that as well. Irk was like, no, once we get him, we'll be the best, like we'll 100% be the best team. Like you have to get him, and so I owe Irk a lot of that. I think for like having my back in the negotiation side of things with Will. But yeah, so then basically because that happened, I think Tainted were kind of like, they're like, oh well, Burn will be a good fit for us anyway. So they were kind of happy that it all worked, like it kind of worked out how it did. And then I can't remember who Chiefs got though. It's kind of a weird one. Did they?
It would have been.
Did they get Moe
infrequent or like I can't really remember.
because they might have replaced Sterling at the same time. and got Moe and Infrequent,
Let me have a
because that
look
was a
here.
roster, right? Texter, Flicks, Moe, Infrequent, Tux. I'm pretty sure it was.
Sterling. Sterling. Wait,
It was
Texter,
Sterling?
Tux, Sterling, Flicks, APOC. Oh, APOC.
Oh,
It was
APOC.
APOC.
Wait, what? Wasn't he?
Well,
Wasn't he in
that's
Tainted? What the hell? Yeah, he definitely was in Tainted. Did they?
this was the roster that ended up like playing in the IEM Sydney just after all this roster change stuff. So I'm not sure what ended up happening, to be honest.
That's weird.
But
Oh, well.
I guess it's not so relevant to your story, which is
No, sorry, I just going off on a tangent.
you're just going down a rabbit hole, taking control of
Yeah.
it. Don't worry, mate.
Good memories.
If you ever want to
just
ask me
remembering
any
it.
question, like feel free to just host this. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. So, what do you miss about League of Legends, man?
I don't miss much actually. I still play a lot of League of Legends. Played some last night at about 2 a.m.
I only play ARAMs. Good game.
No, fuck ARAMs. Anyways, so it's kind of funny that you mention Irk picking you essentially, and kind of being that guy that told Will that you needed to join the roster because it would make the roster way better, and like you were just going to be sick as a team, because that's pretty much essentially what ended up happening. You know, the way that I've kind of categorized this again is it's like the honeymoon period that never really ended for Grayhound, because as soon as you join this roster, it's gone from a kind of a top 4 discussion to Grayhound being the best team in the region and everyone else being like playing second fiddle and trying to catch up. So what was that kind of like, you know, coming into this roster, you know, playing with Dexter and Urcast for the first time? And this is the big question. Was it the best career move of your life?
I think definitely the last part. Like, I think it was very lucky. So, basically, the reason I think it happened, like, or like, I don't want to say that it didn't like deserve to be like in a top team or anything, but I think like there's like other players could have filled my role at the same time and done like a good job as well. You know what I mean? But I think the reason I got the offer was because I'd always kind of been friendly with Irk and Sean at like events and stuff. Like we always, whenever we had drinks or anything, it was like I kind of like there was one time where it was Zen League or something, and we like just played a game. We played like an ESEA game or something. This is when I was living in Sydney, and then Irk was like, "Hey bro, like Zen League just finished with drinking in Parramatta or something. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" So I just like drove there and just had drinks with them and stuff like that. And I think that was kind of an aspect of why Irk was keen, or like Irk and Sean both kind of were keen to pick me up. Was like not as much because of who I was as a player. Like I think they were like happy with like they were like, yeah, he's a good player and everything, but like as a like we like him as a person, and that was a big thing in their team, was like having a good like friend culture kind of thing. So I think that's why Irk, and I think that's something Irk really like. That's something he always looks for in a team, is like having someone who's socially going to fit in and be friends with everyone. Because obviously then you have like a positive vibe in the team, and that's kind of important. So I think that's why the like option was kind of there for me, was like just friendship, like just like for upcoming players, just be friends with everyone.
Yep.
It's a good like, you know, if you're a dick, no one's going to want to play with you. So like I think that's why I kind of like set myself up like for the opportunity, in the fact that I was just like friends with the guys at that time. But yeah, obviously you can look back and just say that was probably the best choice. Like, you know, if I'd gone to Tainted, I think I would not be where I am now, or I don't think the team would have had the success that this team has.
Do you think you still would have found a way onto this Renegades roster that you're on now if you would have joined Tainted at the time? Or was it like a one ticket, and if you don't take it, there's no other chances?
I don't know. I think if I hadn't taken the offer at the time, like I think this team would still be where it's at now. I think.
But would it include you?
Yeah, no, I don't think it would. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think they would be at the same point now with another player, and they wouldn't forgive me for not taking their offer. I reckon. Okay. Not in like a bad way, like as in like, well, we hate that guy, didn't take our offer. I think they would have just been like, you know, he made his choice.
Then maybe this is a difficult question for you to answer. Do you know if you didn't accept that offer, who would have got the offer?
I think they probably would have just kept Cal. I'm not really sure. I don't really know who they would have gotten outside of that. I just think at some point, like I think they would have kept winning, and at some point, you know, Josh would have like become an option. I think they could have got Josh, and it'd be the same team now, but maybe I don't know, maybe it really depends. Like, would I still be a good like a good player if I'd not joined the team, and if I didn't have all this experience that I have now overseas and stuff. Like, there's a lot that I know that I wouldn't know if I didn't get to play. Like, and prior, like, we go boot camp and all this stuff. I learn all this stuff that I would never be able to have if I didn't play in this team. So I think I would be like a much worse player if I'd stayed in Oz this whole time. And then, there'd be players who just would be better than I would be in the position to take their offer.
As you'd expect. But luckily for you, at least, that didn't happen, and you're still here on the Renegades roster. Either way, at the time that this roster move happened, it was I think it was like 3 weeks before IEM Sydney 2018, or it was at least very, very close to IEM Sydney 2018.
Yeah.
And I remember obviously being a caster and, trying to sort of theory craft what would happen with these roster moves. I was thinking like, what the fuck? Why would you make a roster move this close to IEM Sydney? This is the biggest tournament of basically your career. And everyone was thinking like, this is a crazy time to make a move. But did it sort of feel like that for you and for maybe the rest of the teams as well? I don't know if you can comment on it for them, but it seems like a pretty strange time to make a change. And the only argument that we could really make, and I remember it at the time, was that once you make that roster move, there's often the honeymoon period where team just performs so much better because they've made this roster change and everyone's sort of really happy that they've upgraded their roster in a sense.
I think, sorry, I think what happens is teams at that point, because we just had like tournaments. So Grayhound had the Asus ROG, you were saying? They were just at that tournament and they just played that and they didn't manage to win that. I think they came second or third or something like that. They did pretty well.
From memory, it was actually not a great tournament for Grayhound.
Didn't they? Because I thought that was one where
they might have come second. Yeah, they might have come second, I think. Hang on, I'll go back and have a bit of a look.
Pretty sure they beat Tyloo and they beat Vega Squadron or something there, right? Or was Vegas? No, maybe Vega Squadron was something else. But I remember them having a fairly decent result, and then I think the last game they played was disappointing. It was like they played Tyloo for the second time and they lost. And they weren't happy. And I think they kind of realized what I was saying earlier about how you kind of have one player in the team who everyone kind of feels is holding them back. And that's I think that's what happened is like at the same time Tainted had the CG LAN and they kind of realized that with Connor. And then I think Greyhound had this Asus ROG tournament. They realized that with Cal and they kind of both, it was just like unfortunate timing, I guess, that it was so close to IEM Sydney. But you can't keep a player in a team longer than you should because of a tournament that's coming up in a few months, because then there's going to be a tournament a month after that and there's going to be one a month after that and you just end up snowballing it. So you've just got to pull the band-aid off at some point.
They were third, fourth. I'm pretty sure they played against Gambit now that I start thinking about it.
That was
they lost to Tyloo in the semi-final. So it was Gambit Vega in one side of the bracket and Greyhound Tyloo.
Yeah, and Greyhound had beaten Tyloo and Vega, I think.
Correct. They won their group. Yeah, they won their group 2-0.
Yeah, I remember that because Ollie has a photo with Dozier. Must have been at that tournament.
Yeah, but and it was a very close result as well, like 16-14 loss, 16-11 loss.
Yeah, so I think at that tournament, sometimes you have games or just series like that where you kind of realize like what you need to get you over the edge, and it's also a thing like if you have players who feel like one player is a reason why they didn't win a series like that or something like that, it can be hard to get that. Like, if it consistently happens and someone's not working on it, and I'm not saying that's what happened with this situation, but I'm just saying like in general, you can get in this mentality where like the person isn't trying to work on themselves and they are trying to improve that aspect of their game that's holding the team back. And then at that point, if you can see that they're not putting in the work or they're not changing themselves, you just have to like, it sounds bad, but you kind of just have to give up on them a little bit and just be like, all right, like, I guess we'll just try to find someone who will like fill this aspect that we need. I think that's kind of what happened was they were like, and it happened with both Tainted and with Greyhound, is they kind of were just like, we need to make a change now. And it's as good a time as any because we have a bit of time to work on like our team or like our strats and all this kind of stuff before IEM Sydney. And I don't know. Thing with how Greyhound played at least was when I was coming in, it was a lot of just fundamental like stuff that I kind of already knew, but you have to just see it from like their perspective. In that sense, like that's the hard part is like learning how they like to play out rounds and stuff like that. And that you can achieve pretty, like I can pick it up pretty quickly and be like a relatively decent part of their like success quickly more quickly than if they had like heaps of strats that I had to learn and remember all this stuff, which wasn't the case back then. So it was actually pretty easy for me to join up. And then 3 weeks later, I think it was 3 weeks later, we had the qualifier for IEM Sydney, because I remember playing in that as well.
It was pretty close. Like it wasn't like a huge sort of massive like time of to get ready, but it was also not like, okay, 1 week and then you're straight into IEM.
Yeah, because it was that for the Pro League quals, I think, was we had 2 weeks and then Pro League quals in Sydney, and that was a bit of a stretch, but we managed to make it work. But yeah, it's easy with these guys as well. Like Urk and Chris were really good with working with me like one-on-one, just explaining like certain rounds and stuff like that. Like Chris has a really good idea of how he wants things to play out and how he wants people to like contribute. Obviously, like people bring their own creativity and stuff like that, but he has an idea of like, this is what your goal is, and then like it's your job to get that goal in the round, basically.